Hey guys, welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be solving the LeetCode question image overlap. Alright, so in this question we're given two images A and B, and these images are represented in binary square matrices of the same size. So the size of A is the same size of B, and binary just means that it's only zeros and ones. And we translate one image however we choose. So we can slide it to the left, right, up, or down any number of units. Okay, and then we place it on top of the other image. So after the overlap of this translation is the number of positions that have a 1 on both images. Okay, so if there's a 1 in one position, after a certain translation, the other one is overlapping on top of it. Okay, so note also that a translation does not include any kind of rotation. And what is the largest possible overlap? Alright, so as it is, the question is a little bit confusing, so let's try to understand what that actually means, and let's just look at an image to explain that. Okay, so over here we have two matrices, and think of each of them as an image. So this over here is image A, and this over here is image B. So we have two images, and they have some sort of values of zeros and ones in some positions. And note that they always will have the same size. So over here, we have two 3x3 binary matrices. Okay, so our task is how many overlapping ones do we have when we put these images on top of each other? So for example, we're only going to translate the image A. So you could translate both of them, but just for simplicity, we're just going to say that we're only translating image A. So over here, if we put image A on top of image B, so in this case, image A would fit directly on top. So over here, right on top of image B would be image A. So how many ones are overlapping? So in this case, we have a 1 in the middle, and we also have a 1 in the middle. So those two are going to overlap. We have a 1 on the top right for A, but this is a 0, so there's no overlap. The same way we have a 1 on the bottom right, but A doesn't have a 1 in the bottom right. So in this case, we only have one overlapping, which is for the one which is in the middle for A and B. So what we can do here is we can move A in right in either of the four directions, and we can translate it how many ever times we want in order to get the highest number of ones. So let's say we move the A matrix to the right by 1 unit. So if we move to the right by 1 unit, we're going to have the starting of it over here, and it's going to cover these two columns. And it's also going to have a column which is kind of out of bounds. So this is going to be that out of bounds column over here. And this is how our matrix is going to look like. So this is going to have the 1. This is going to be 1, then 0, 0, 1, 0, and then 0, 1, and 0. So this over here is actually slightly better. So how many overlapping ones do we have? So we have 1 overlapping over here, and we have 1 overlapping over here. Actually, sorry. We have 1 overlapping over here. This does not have an overlapping. And we have another overlapping over here. I know it's a little bit hard to see, but just imagine moving the entire matrix A to the right by 1. So in this case, we actually end up with 2 overlapping ones, which is better than our previous solution. So now what we're going to do, as it is, it's over here at this position. And we can perform even more translations to it. So we can move it to the up, we can move it down, left, whatever we want. So we already know the answer, so just for this case, we're going to move it down. So when you move it to the down, we already moved it to the right. So the starting is already over here. Now we're going to move it down by 1. So the other border is going to end up being over here. We're going to have an extra column on this side here. And we're also going to have an extra column going below the B matrix. So this is how it's going to look like. And if you write the numbers as it is, so over here we have 1. So as you can see, we have 1 overlapping. Over here, we have another overlapping, and then we have 0 here, 1 here, and then this ends up being 0, then this is 0, 1, and 0. If you're confused by what I'm doing, all I'm doing is I'm just copying down this matrix so you can see how it looks like when we put both of them on top of each other. So as you can see, over here, we have 3 overlapping ones, over here, and over here. So in this case, we're going to output the number 3. So this is the question, and this is what it actually means. So now let's actually try to understand how can we solve this question? So let's just go through one which seems kind of intuitive and more logical, at least to me. So what we're going to end up doing is we're going to iterate through each of our matrices. So we're going to iterate through matrix A and matrix B. And for each of them, we're going to end up storing wherever we find the value of 1. So in this case, so let's go through A real quickly. So we find the value of 1 at this position. So what we're going to do is we're going to store that in some place. So we're going to store this position. So this is at a position of 0, 0. So how do we know 0, 0? So the row is at an index 0 and the column is also at an index 0. And the first value is going to represent the x value per se, and the second value is going to represent the y value. Okay, so let's go to the next value over here. We also have a 1 here. So we're going to add the value 1, 0, right? And then over here, we do not have a 1, so we're not going to add anything. So this way, what we're going to do is we're going to iterate through each of our matrices, and we're going to add all of the indices and the locations which have a value of 1. So let's just go through this real quick. So we have 1 over here. So this is going to be 1, 1. And then we have another 1 over here. So this has an index of 2, 1. It's just x, y. That's it. Similarly, I'm going to do the same thing for B. So now we got both of our values, and let's just say they're both in lists. So both of them are inside of a list. And what we're going to do is we're going to iterate through list A, and we're also going to iterate through list B. And while we're iterating through them, what we're going to be doing is for each instance of A, so for each instance where we find a value of 1, so for example, we find a value of 1 at the index 0, 0. So we want to see how can we move this matrix so that we can move it in such a way that this corresponding 1 is overlapping with this 1 over here. So how do we move this matrix over here so that this 1 goes over here? So how do we do that? So there's several different ways to do that, and you can kind of go through it step by step. So you would move to the right by 1 and you would move down by 1. So, but how do we actually write this in sort of a program? So to do that, it's pretty simple. All we're going to do is we're going to find the difference in the x and y values. So what is the difference in the x value here? So it's going to be 1 minus 0, and for the y values, we also have 1 minus 0. So the x value here is going to represent the horizontal translation, and the y value is going to represent the vertical translation. So over here, we're going to end up with 1, 1. And this is supposed to be a negative sign, so 1 minus 0. So this is the translation. So if you move this to the right by 1, and you move it down by 1, then in that case, they overlap each other. So normally, I know it's a little bit confusing. You would think going down to be negative 1, but in this case, going down is positive 1, going up is negative 1. Okay, so yeah, so this is how we have it, and we're going to do this for each and every value. So now in this case, this value of 1, in order to get it over here, we have this translation. So we're going to store this somewhere. Then after that, we're going to see how can we get this value over here to overlap for this value of 1. We're going to perform the same steps. We're going to do 1 minus 0, which is 1, and then 2 minus 0, which is 2. And then this is going to be another value which we store in our dictionary. So we're going to keep adding these values to our dictionary. So for example, over here, we are going to end up with 2, 2, and obviously we're going to end up adding 2, 2 to our dictionary. So currently our dictionary has these 3 values. So how does it actually make sense? And they're all going to have a value of 1. So all of these are the keys with the value of 1. So how do we actually find out what the maximum overlapping numbers are? So now we're done with all of the iterations for this element against that of B. So now we're going to move to the next value. So before we move on to the next iteration, it's going to be this value, but I actually did a small mistake, and this is actually not equal to 1, 0. Instead, it's 0, 1. So sorry about that. This is actually 0, 1. Okay, so now that we have that, we can move on to our next iteration, which is 0, 1 over here. And we're going to perform the same steps. So we're going to go to 0, 1, which is this. And our goal is to make it so that this value over here, so in particular this 1 over here, has to overlap with each of the ones in the matrix B. And we're going to do the same steps. So over here we have 0, 1 and 1, 1. So that ends up being 1 minus 0. And then we have 1 minus 1, which is 0, giving us 1, 0. And since 1, 0 doesn't exist, we're going to add that to our dictionary. That's a 1. Okay, so next step. So we have 1, 2. So that's 1 minus 0, which is 1, and 2 minus 1, which is 1. But do notice that this value already exists in our dictionary over here. So we don't need to create a new instance of it. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to go to that original value and we're going to add the value plus 1. So it was originally 1 and now it's actually going to be 2. So you can kind of understand the pattern and this is going to keep going on. So why does this actually work and what is going to be the end answer? So if you keep going on, our values are going to keep adding up. And to a point, one of them is going to have a value of 3. We know that because that is the answer for this question. So we get that by iterating through everything in A and everything in B. So what's going to happen, and what this is basically telling us, is when you perform the translation 1, 1, you have two things that are happening. So this value changes and it overlaps onto another 1. So that causes one overlapping. And this value also changes, which also causes another overlapping. And just to I'm just going to skip a few steps. So normally you would do this along with this, and then afterwards you're going to go to this number over here, and you'll do the same thing over here. And once again, when you come over here with this value 1, 1, you're going to end up with 1, 1 again. So in that case, we're going to go here and add a value of 1 again, and this is going to end up being 3. So you can see how we got our answer. And all it's telling us, by performing the translation 1, 1, we end up with getting 3 ones which are overlapping on top of each other. So what we're going to do is at the ending, we're going to take all of our values from our dictionary and we're going to return whatever the maximum value is. And in this case, that number is 3. So we're going to end up returning 3. So now let's see how we can do the same thing in code. Alright, so let's start off by defining the two lists that we have. So first we're going to have a list. So this list is going to store all of the A values wherever we have the value 1. So I'll just call this A underscore 1 and it's going to be an empty list. And then we're going to have the same for our second matrix B. So B underscore 1 is equal to an empty list as well. So now we need to add the tuple values of the x, y index to this array over here. So what we're going to do is we're going to iterate through them. So we can just do for I in range length of A. And the reason we're just taking the length of A, or we can take the length of B, is because they both have the same shape, so it doesn't matter. And then we're going to do for J in range of length I. Okay, so we have this over here. And now what we're going to do is we're going to check whether that whatever value we currently are at, so we can get the value we're at going to the ith index and then going to whatever the jth index is, and we're going to check if that is equal to 1. If that is equal to 1, we're going to add that to our list over here. So in this case, we're in the A matrix, so we're going to go to A underscore 1 and we're going to use dot append, and we're going to append a tuple values of I, j. And now I'm just going to copy this over here. And I'm going to do the same thing, but instead we're going to do it for B. So we're going to check if that whatever value we're at is the same for B, is equal to 1 for B. And if it is, we're going to go to B underscore 1 and we're going to append that value. So by the ending of this list, we're going to end up with both of these lists completely filled with the x, y indices of wherever there is a value of 1. So now we're going to go on to the next part, which is storing these values in some sort of dictionary. So I'm going to call this dictionary D, and it's just going to be an empty dictionary. And we're also going to have an answers variable, and this is going to have a value of 0. So over here, what we want to do is we want to iterate through each of the A underscore 1 values and the B underscore 1 values. And we want to see what sort of translation the A needs to take in order to overlap that particular one with the B value. So in order to do that, I'm going to do for A underscore X, and I'll also get the Y value. So A underscore X, comma A underscore Y in our A underscore 1 list. And we're also going to iterate through everything of our B underscore 1 list. So the same way I'll just do for B underscore X and B underscore Y in B underscore 1. Okay, so after we get this, we want to see what is the translation we want to do. So I'll just call this translation, and the translation is going to be equal to the bx value, so b underscore x minus the a underscore x value, And this is going to be inside of a tuple, so inside of brackets. So this is going to be the translation for the x-axis, and for our y-axis, we're going to take b underscore y and subtract that with a underscore y. Okay, so this is our translation value, and over here we want to check if that value exists inside of our dictionary. So if translation in D, so if that is the case, if it does exist, then we're going to go to our dictionary, go to that translation element, and we're going to increase its value by 1. So if it does not exist, then we're going to create a new key with the key as translation. So translation, and it's going to start off with a value of 1. And if it does exist, well, we're going to increase the value by 1. Okay, so that's going to be it for our dictionary. And each time we go inside of this, we're going to change the value of whatever the answer is. So the answer is going to be the maximum from the previous answer. So whatever our previous answer is already stored in the answer variable. So for our first iteration, it's going to be a value of 0. So we're going to choose between that value of 0 or by whatever this value is. So we can get that value by just going here. And to be more clear, we're going to go to that specific key and we want to get whatever its value is. So that key can have some sort of value, and let's say that value in the first iteration is a value of 1. So in that case, we're going to end up changing our answer to be a value of 1. So let's say after a few iterations that we find a greater value which has a value of 2. So in that case, our answer is going to end up changing from 1 to 2. So that's how our answer variable is going to end up changing. And each time by the ending, it's going to have the maximum a value in the values list. So at the ending, since it has the maximum value, we can just directly return our answer variable. Okay, so I made a really small mistake over here. I wrote length of I, and I is just an integer value. So instead, let's just do a of 0. Sorry. Okay, and this should work, so submit. Okay, so I ended up spelling translation incorrectly. Okay, I'll just change the name of this. So instead of calling it translation, I'll just call it something like TR. So this is going to be TR, and hopefully it is accepted this time. Okay, there you go. So our submission was accepted. And finally, thanks a lot for watching, guys. Do let me know if you have any sort of suggestions, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this video helped you. Thank you.